evening. I'll call to order the Charter Review Task Force. This is Tuesday, June 25th, 2019, and I'm Gary Hexpeth, the chairman of the Charter Review Task Force. We have a quorum tonight, and the first thing I'd like to do is ask if there's any public comment from the audience. We recognize you if you have any. Seeing none, we're going to move on to the schedule, task force. The current schedule as it stands now is July 1st. We have a working group 3, which is Bill, at 5 o'clock. And we have a task force meeting on July 2nd, which is Tuesday, at 6 o'clock. We previously had scheduled a task force on the 17th of July on Wednesday, but it's my understanding that this room is not available, so we had to cancel that. We'll discuss that in a minute. So you can cross that off, but we'll look about adding something. And we have a task force meeting on Tuesday, July 30th at 6 o'clock. And there are no other working groups scheduled. Do I need to repeat that? There are no other working groups scheduled after July 1st. Now I'll tell the audience and those watching on the videotape that the working groups have been good because we've had community input from Celebration homeowners and discussions about various topics, and that's been very good. But we haven't gotten all the various inputs and enough participation to say that we've got all sides of the debate. So we're going to open it up to a new format that Kathy Van Tassel is going to host. It's going to be in a format scheduled, you can write this down, for Saturday, July 13th at 10 o'clock in the morning. All is invited. The public is welcome, of course. And we're going to discuss at length 4 specific topics. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy, who's going to introduce the program.
Okay, good evening. The process that we're going to be doing on Saturday, July 13th, I'd like you to think about it as a facilitative process. Very open, very inclusive of the community. The goal is to get as many ideas and thoughts and concepts down in regards to these topics as we possibly can. Interactive dialogue, not to censor opinions, but just to collect as much information and thoughts as we can. The 4 topics that we will be talking about, which seem to be prevalent hot topics, for lack of a better term. The first one is this: the RFP process for CROA management agents, for the agent. What is the process for the CROA management agent? For each of these, we will have the respective bylaws and the connective points that are currently in the charter for you to review. The second are CROA director term limits. What should those look like and be? The third topic, group homes and residential treatment facilities. And the fourth topic will be the process for bringing topics to the CROA board for consideration. So we'll make sure that those are well advertised, but what we're going to try to do is stay specifically on those 4 topics, get as much community participation and involvement and comments and dialogue going as we possibly can, generate ideas, write those down, and bring those back to the task force. I think the other thing we would probably do at that point is bucket ideas so that can we determine common themes? Is there consistency of thought amongst the community? And how do we really take that into account in moving forward? So we do hope to have more of these sessions, but this is the first one scheduled for July 13th. Did I leave anything out? I'm not sure if I did I? Okay.
Very good. Thank you, Kathy. Since we're on the topic, I'll ask if we intend to have several sessions on these topics to get the majority of voices and opinions on these 4 issues. The first is Saturday the 13th. I'll ask Kathy, put you on the spot. Do you see an opening in your schedule where we could have another session sometime in July?
I will take a look. Stand by, please hold.
All right.
Back shortly.
It will also be, of course, we'll have to check the schedule for availability of the rooms.
Possibly Saturday, July 20th
Were you thinking another one in July or August?
or August.
Because it was July 13th is the next one.
Right, so we could
Yes.
do August,
Well, July 20th, that's 2 weeks.
yeah, that's the week after.
Well, do you want it to be on a Saturday, or should we look for an alternative day of the week to get other participation?
I'm
Yeah.
totally open to whatever you want to do. That's, yeah,
Mhm.
whatever.
If back-to-back Saturdays in July, you're gonna have the same problem, people on vacation.
Yep.
Right.
I
Mhm.
agree.
I think an evening would be good.
Well, when
Sure.
does school start? Because that's when everybody comes back.
August
15,
15th, somewhere around there.
something like that, yeah.
Okay.
Mhm. Well,
So maybe like
what-
Tuesday, August 20th? I'm happy to do an evening session also.
well,
Session is about 2 hours.
Yeah, August 20th. That day, the 19th and 20th are both open.
They are for me too.
Hmm.
Grab them now.
Okay. I will say on the 20th, there's a CCDD meeting.
Okay, maybe the 19th?
Does that sound good?
ARC meeting that evening, but we can.
I'll have to check room availability, but I'll put down, I'll look
This-
at August 19th.
This
We'll
is
do a
the
whole-
list that
They
I
told you
got.
it was okay.
Yeah, this is
Okay.
good. So the second, what is a good time?
Yeah, but I thought you said you wanted them in the morning, 10 a.m.,
Well, that was
That's just for
Saturday.
Saturday.
just for
But
Saturday.
if we're gonna pick another day, let's have it in the
Yeah.
evening, since most people.
6 to
work.
8 is fine, if you want to do a 6 to 8. People can grab a bite and then head on
So
down.
our second session will be Monday, the 19th at 6 o'clock.
August the 20th?
No,
August
August the
what?
19th, Monday.
19th, okay, thank you.
It's a better day, and it's open, this room is available.
Okay? This way we can advertise it to get as much participation as possible.
Exactly.
That's the goal.
Thank you very much for checking.
My pleasure.
And now,
Early.
we still have several issues that the working groups have brought forward to the task force. We'll discuss some of them tonight. There are other issues that overlap your facilitated sessions, so we're going to suspend those until we get more feedback and input from the community, so we can combine the working group input as well as these sessions together. That will be, by the time we put all that together, that could be late August. So in the meantime, the task force will continue meeting and discuss what, part of what I just received, as soon as I show you. Okay. I have not distributed this, I will do it first thing in the morning. We've got the official COA Technology Committee inputs to the charter, and we have the official Covenants Committee inputs to the charter.
Yay.
Right, so both of those I'll distribute to the task force first thing in the morning for you to review. And since we were suspending some of these topics until late August to get more input, then I would recommend that, as well as continuing our topics that we're doing tonight, that on July 1st, the task force meeting will look at the Technology Committee input. That's so, when you get this tomorrow morning, it's only 2.5 pages.
The working group or the task force
No,
on
this
July
is-
2nd?
On the
The
2nd.
first is the working group, the second is the task force.
Right, no, these inputs are not part of the working group.
So that's for the second.
This
July
is
2nd.
for the task force
Second.
meeting on the 2nd.
Second, yeah.
Okay.
So now, there's your homework assignment, in addition to your inputs that you receive, is look at the technology committee. You will get the Covenants Committee input, but it's quite lengthy and detailed, and we'll hold that off till a future task force meeting. But I highly encourage that you read it to get up on what they're interested in. Some of it actually covers a few things we've already talked about. Okay. So are we good with the schedule and where we're going so far? Would you, after tonight's meeting, I'll just ask the task force. We had to cancel the meeting on July 17th because of room availability, but the room is available on the 16th. You know we have a meeting on the 30th. Are you willing to meet again
On Tuesday?
sometime in the mid-July? Does that fit your schedule so we
Yeah,
can
that's
continue
fine.
discussion?
July on the 16th?
Well, I'm asking you. Is
I'm
that
good.
July 16th? What day of the week is that?
It's Tuesday.
Well, I take that back.
At present, yes.
According to this, it's not available. Do you
See,
have
I
any?
thought that was one that we were originally booked and it wasn't available, right? What those, the
Right,
dates we looked at,
that's right,
it wasn't available.
And the only thing available is the 23rd, 25th, and 30th.
The following week?
Yeah, we already have the 30th scheduled.
25th is okay for me.
That's a Thursday. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Those are all okay with me.
All right. I recommend that we add to the schedule a task force meeting on Thursday, the July 25th, at 6 PM in this room. It's available, and we'll continue discussions. We will have things to discuss. We never have a lack of things.
So you don't know.
Will these dates all come out in a comprehensive email?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, but I'm telling you now because it's on videotape and the board liaisons are here, so it's public knowledge.
Okay.
Yes, but I will summarize that to an email to the task force. Okay.
But you don't know what the topic will be tonight, that.
No, I do not. I will announce that later. It depends on what we get through today, and technology is the subject. Technology inputs is the subject for July the 2nd.
Okay,
Not July 1st.
July
Now,
2nd.
July 1st is a working group, and that's yours.
That's mine.
Right.
Okay.
Your subjects are on your working sheet. The July 2nd task force, we're going to start with the technology inputs, which I will forward to you tomorrow, so you'll have a week to look at them,
Okay.
as well as other topics on the working sheets that the working group has already finished and will get through, which brings us to that list. We've covered all the things to do. I am ready to move forward. As last time, we're going to start with the issue sheets, and I numbered them 1 through 9. And I'm just going in order of the charter, from top to bottom, where we left off. So the first one that we haven't talked about is on Charter 6.1, and I've got it on the screen here. And it's tracking number 4-1 on page 13. And I'm looking at version 6 of your issue sheets. And it's Charter 6.1. Is it raining or is that the? Okay.
No.
The issue for the audience is, and these came from the background issues that were forwarded to us from a list of 3 years of inputs from the board and town hall.
Public right-of-ways?
This was, one of the issues was, consider adding a provision requiring owners to clean up debris for any construction project when a state of emergency is issued, and we're talking about weather, like a hurricane. So, in 6.1 is titled Maintenance by Owners, and the working group 4 suggested this input, which is in blue on the screen. Homeowners are responsible, a new paragraph, homeowners are responsible for making arrangements to secure their property and cleaning any debris from any construction project when any weather-related emergency is issued, period. That was the recommendation from the working group on the 12th of July. And I hope that you looked at these since I
Yeah.
sent this a couple weeks ago.
Because you changed it slightly, right? From state of emergency
We
In
agreed to
parentheses,
that.
hurricane.
In the working group you attended,
Yeah, I know,
yeah, right,
'cause that's what I have.
that's right.
Okay.
This is the end result of the working group. After much,
That's the same as I remember.
yes.
Yeah.
So I apologize that it's kind of rotated over a whole page here. But it's actually saying two things. Homeowners are responsible for making arrangements, meaning they may not live here, but they're still responsible for securing their property. And if they're doing a remodeling process on their home, there may be equipment outside or on the street, cleaning up any debris from a project when a weather-related emergency is issued, period. Any discussion? Does that sound reasonable?
Yep.
Sounds reasonable.
The only question I would have is if it's a tornado warning, I think we got a tornado warning last week.
Mhm.
Fortunately, it didn't hit Celebration. There was a matter of maybe 10 minutes of notice with that tornado warning coming. Would that be considered a weather-related issue, emergency?
Yes. Now, originally, the working group discussed, should we make it for hurricanes only? Because you have advance notice.
Right.
And then they decided, no, it doesn't matter. It should be in,
Well, so we're not sending staff out to
It
do
doesn't-
violation
it doesn't-
notices on, or to look during a tornado warning.
it doesn't say that.
No, I know, just,
It doesn't say that. It says homeowners are responsible for
Right.
making arrangements. There's nothing in there about Coral Board or Town Hall or staff taking care of any of this.
but if we get notification or documentation of it not being done, then we can enforce it at that point in time. That's the intention of where,
That's the intention if the weather-related emergency actually impacted the
Correct.
town. If nothing happened and it blew over, there would be no damage, so there'd be no violation. Nothing would be blown around. That's just my,
and so I just asked these questions to be the devil's advocate, because I know that they'll show up at Covenant Committee and then there'll be an appeal in front of the board with those types of questions being asked, so that's why I wanted to just throw those out there.
fair. We did discuss all that.
Okay, good.
We did.
We did.
No
Ad
discussion. I'm
nauseam.
gonna- Any other discussion? I'm going to call for a vote to either accept or reject. Any other, yes?
I accept.
Well, we haven't called for a vote yet. Any conversation?
Well, I think I was the one who was most troubled by exactly what Steve brought up, and that I would prefer, the tornado warning came from, I don't know who it came from. but
National Weather Service.
Is that who it was? Okay. I thought we were dealing more with when CROA basically announces like we did, I believe, during the last
We
big.
have no authority at all to announce. What we're doing is pushing forward anything that the National Weather Service is telling us.
I wouldn't
Or
put,
state of emergency.
Right.
right, I wouldn't put the onus on CROA or town hall staff to issue any emergency.
No.
That's beyond their scope of their work.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And if we're issuing things like that, then we're assuming some liability for not issuing. Or, we didn't get out in time or all those kind of things. People have to be responsible for their own properties.
I mean, basically, that was the idea, that
Yeah.
people would, encouraging people to make plans ahead and be responsible.
But if I'm in New York and there's a tornado warning, I'm not gonna get here
No,
to be
you're
able
not.
to secure. So,
You're probably not gonna be able to secure it in the scenario that we had last week. It's just
right,
impossible.
you're
for
going
you
to the
get
back,
out there and-
right,
It's
I can
almost,
tell you, I
shelter.
can tell you my stuff was not secure.
yeah.
I will tell you, it's
And
one
you
of those.
thought
I wasn't home.
I'll put forth this scenario. If you don't live here and you're in another state and you only live here part-time, and then you decide to have a renovation done on your home where there's construction equipment, then you and the contractor have to discuss this possibility because you're not here. See what I mean? It says homeowners responsible for making arrangements. So it's something you and your contractor should discuss.
And it was very problematic, just from a standpoint during the hurricanes.
Mhm,
Because we
sure.
were, I mean, we knew 72 hours out that that storm was an
Hit,
imminent hit
right.
to where we were. And the day before, we were running around talking to people to try and get them to clean up their debris.
There was nothing in the charter or bylaws that implied or reflected that concern. So now we're actually putting something in the charter that homeowners we can point to and say, yes, I am responsible.
So what if I choose not to, and Irma comes through?
Your insurance will cover your damage, and if.
What happens to
You're
me
gonna get fined.
from a crow? Okay,
It's an egregious fine.
okay.
It doesn't solve the problem that
Right.
debris is gonna be
Yeah,
flying around the
my
neighborhood during.
yard
hurricane,
chair
but you'll
goes
get
through my
fined
neighbor's
for it,
window.
right. And hopefully it discourages people from
Okay.
not cleaning up there.
Okay,
We're kind of putting everyone on notice that you should think about these things.
sure.
You know, if perhaps maybe doing a home renovation when you're out of town is not a good idea.
During hurricane season.
During hurricane season.
Yeah,
Well,
or-
we could even, when we're issuing permits at town hall, we
Mhm.
can even say, if there, especially in the middle of hurricane season, please make sure that you have all items secure.
Right, and I think we were on the approval letter from ARC, but if we didn't have any teeth to support it or to.
Now you do,
Right.
or possibly
I
can.
agree.
And I think the idea is that that's something you should discuss with your contractor before you sign with them, that even if you're in town, I mean, it's a problem that you have a big dumpster, what are you gonna do with it? Everybody told me, you can't put it in the garage. That in the event that there is, that there's a time window, they will help you or be available.
It's kind of common sense.
Yeah, but I wouldn't want to just call up a contractor who was working
Right.
2 days before a hurricane and say, what are you gonna do if I uncovered?
Ironically, I
Dumpster.
just got a significant weather alert.
I just-
There you go. You got it too.
Same thing, I'm like, oh man, I don't have my furniture covered.
I can see through the window, the sun's shining.
I know.
Any other thoughts or conversation? I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of this change, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? All right, that passes. And today's the 25th. Number 2, I know it's scattered on your issue sheets, but it's in sequence here,
Yeah.
is Charter 7-1 B. Whoops. Keep hitting. Not used to it.
64 and B.
It's page 4.
All right, I'm in
No.
Chapter 7, 7.1, and subparagraph B, which is leasing. And we've already talked about this and actually approved it on the 29th of May.
We did.
And here's the change here we just said, give a copy of the lease to the board. We discovered that giving it to town hall was not appropriate since everything, we rediscussed this in the working group. Town hall is not appropriate. Everything CROA does is per the board.
Right.
So we left it here, a copy of the lease goes to the board. Now I'm going to scroll way down to Rules Exhibit C, where this is correlated. I'm in Rules Exhibit C, number 6, leasing of units. In the 4th paragraph, it reiterates what's in the charter. Notice of a lease, together with a copy, as the board may require, shall be given to the board. So it conforms with that. And I just wanted to point out that we had thought town hall was appropriate. It's really more appropriate to say the board because all regulations come from the core board. So that this is minor, but I wanted to bring it up to show, to show you that it's a,
Are you doing a word search to change that throughout the
Yes.
document? Because I'm finding a lot of them.
oh, no. This is the only issue about leasing where we talk about
Board versus,
board versus town hall.
right.
There's very little in there that, at all on any subject that says town hall.
I found 3. Okay,
No, totally different.
okay.
So this minor update, I think is reasonable. It conforms with the rest of the document.
All right.
Any discussion? You're okay?
It's reasonable.
No.
I'll ask for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
All right. Nay?
Yeah.
No. All right. Issue number 3 for tonight.
And that's 6 and 1.
You're ahead of me. As soon as I find it.
6-1 through,
Yep.
6-1 through 6-5.
Well, number 3 is tracking number 3-4. It's on page 8. Right.
On page,
Tracking number 3-4 is in paragraph chapter 12(1)A about association expenses. The issue was, we were considered to include trash services as part of the annual
oh,
assessment
yeah.
for single-family homes only. If you'll recall, when you get your assessment in the mail, trash services are broken out separately. It's a separate contract, and that's
Right.
fine. But it wasn't clear, and our lawyer talked about it at our last task force meeting.
Mhm.
So, here's the comment right here. Working group added trash services as part of the annual assessment for single-family homes. So, under paragraph 12(1)A, common expenses include, and we broke this into 3 paragraphs, I, double I, and triple I, so that it would be easy to read.
Mhm.
Nothing changed, but we added a new subparagraph triple I, annual trash service assessment for single-family homes. This is from the working group,
Right.
and thought that this would be the best place to add it, since it's already talking about what makes up common expenses.
Per what the lawyer was talking about. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Just to clarify for those that may not be, understand why trash services are included there. Currently, when we go to foreclosures, or we have any, collection issues, we cannot currently get our trash, investment back. Now that it will be hopefully voted into
So
our,
it's a write-off.
our charter, we will then be able to, claim those too.
Yeah.
So to reiterate, the only addition in this part of the charter for this issue, tracking number 3-4, is to include this little sentence right here at the bottom. The previous 2 phrases were already in there. And, well, they were just phrases separated by semicolons. What we did was separate it into 3 sub-bullets, you might say, so that they would stand out. Discussion or comment?
My curiosity, Steve, and I'm not positive about it, but what about homes that have been abandoned, but they haven't had trash pickup because they've been empty for so long? Are we billing them, or are we being billed for those homes even though they're driving past them? And-
Yes, it's part of the unit, so that becomes part of the actual payment.
Okay, so then there is a bill being sent to the
I believe
bank.
So, yes, yeah, it's part of their account. The trash service fee and their assessment goes on their account.
Okay, even though there was no pickup.
Correct, and that's why this has become a problem, because it's listed separately, it's not listed as an assessment, it's listed as a trash service fee.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right, then that makes a more clear,
Yeah.
concise. Yeah, that makes it's
Okay.
more concise then.
Yes.
All right.
It puts it in line with everything else.
Yeah. So the bank can't go after us on that.
Well, it's not that the bank would go after us, it allows CROA to, that's.
Collect from the
We
bank?
we wanna put every measure in place that's possible to collect as much back as we can.
As,
Bank.
And this
okay.
is a tool for doing that.
Back assessments.
Got it. Okay. All right,
The
then.
service is being performed,
Right.
CROA would just like to be able to
Mm-hmm.
account for it.
And that's according to what the lawyer said at the last meeting, that he would have to find the wording for it.
This was satisfactory.
Okay.
Now, remember, the lawyer's gonna look at the entire document
Right.
when we're done later this fall.
Okay.
So I'm not too worried about it.
And he understands the intention of what you're trying to do.
Yes,
Right.
he does.
Well, he actually is giving some suggestions as to how to do it.
Right.
Right, that's
Right.
what I thought, that's what it was supposed to be saying. Okay.
Well,
All right.
there's another related issue we'll get to.
The same, okay.
So,
Okay.
not any other inputs, discussion? I'll
No.
call for a vote. Are you in favor, say aye.
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 Aye, negative? No, okay. Today is 5th.
And then 13.
The next issue is number 4, right above it on page 8 in your issue sheet, but it is right underneath it. And I've been talking too much, so I'm going to go back to the working group chairman. Bill, I'll put you on the spot and have you discuss, because people are trying to listen to me. This is tracking number 3-3
Okay.
on the replacement reserves. And I'm going to read the issue
Page 8.
first for the audience.
It's not on page, I don't have it on page 8.
You have version 6 of the,
3,
No, I have version 5.
oh, sorry.
Just-
Well,
hold
look-
on a second, I got
Look
it.
for working group 3,
Ah, okay.
and you'll find it under tracking number 3-3.
3.
3, 4.
Fingers pointing.
Right. Well, the issue is that reserves are collected for the purpose of maintaining the physical asset, which is streets, roofs, common area roofs, not my roof. But all the individual things that the town consists of, that the town's also responsible for. And if you're gonna be well-managed, you need a reserve. The reserve, as I understood, is based on a needs assessment that is done every 3 years. And all this is saying is that this is going to be a protection against the reserves being used for any other purposes. In other words, you're collecting the reserves, unless you're clear that they're for the purpose of physical assets, they might go to operating costs or paying for salaries or all those kind of things. So this is just make a clarification that the money we collected for a purpose is limited to that purpose.
Yes, sir. So the working group came up with a new sentence that was put in a separate paragraph here. I'll read it out loud. The replacement reserve funds account shall only be used for repair and replacement of capital items in the replacement reserve engineering study, which Bill referred to. Very simple sentence, but very directive.
Do you mind if I add one thing?
Yes?
You do mind, or you
No.
don't? Okay, good. When Brian or Vaughn, our new treasurer, at board meetings, they go over the treasurer highlight in the report. The first sheet that they always show the audience and the board is the operating, the financials for the operating. And the second sheet is the sheet for all the reserve funds, and they split it into 2 different reserves. And the one on the left is always the replacement reserves. The one on the right is the contingency and the capital reserves that are mixed together.
You're right.
The intention of this is to ensure, because it's not solidified in your charter, to have the wording in there so that the replacement reserves can't be mixed in with the contingency reserve or the capital reserve to build an athletic field complex, those types of things. It holds it just for replacement reserves.
I think we have the right terms.
Yes.
I'm looking to you.
It is. I just want to make sure that in case you're confused about these different pools of money, I give you a visual of Brian or your treasurer standing up here and showing you on the big screen during those meetings of where those pools of funding are.
Right.
So are they going to be in two different columns now?
That's
They're
the
gonna
way that
separate
they'll
them?
show you. They already are. I mean, your replacement reserves are in their own fund.
But somehow they keep getting mixed back and
No,
forth?
not for these. That's the replacement reserve. So your Crow board in the 5 years that I've been here, and I've never heard of them doing this prior to, but they have never spent your replacement reserves on anything but replacement reserves. But there was no rule telling them that they didn't have to, and now there will be. Now this is gonna be.
It's protecting that reserve.
Yes.
It's good practices to do it.
Oh, I know.
It's not
It-
required to do it, now we're making it required to do it.
I'm surprised that it wasn't always
It's all-
separated and kept separate.
Well, they all kept separate.
It has been. There is state law that requires you to fund your reserves.
Right.
But there's no state law that says that you can't use it in
Move it
other
around.
areas. And so now you guys are making sure that it's memorialized in here that it can be.
As long as Steve's been here, and probably since before,
It's always been like
it's
that.
always been accustomed that the Crow board has done this. So we're merely codifying it in writing.
Codifying, okay.
So that it doesn't happen. And yes, sir.
Yeah, 'cause
Okay.
we have no reason to believe that it's ever been
No.
used for other purposes. We're just making sure that going forward, it can't be.
You're not being reactive in this one, you're being proactive.
Yeah.
Okay.
As a question about definition, would you interpret this to mean that only things that are included in the replacement reserve study can be funded from that account? In other words, if something were to happen that had not been in the replacement reserve study for whatever reason, but was a replacement reserve categorized item, a common area, but for whatever reason was not in the study, would it not be able to be used for?
It still would.
Okay.
This is just saying that it can only be used for repair and replacement capital items.
You're thinking of emergency type.
Right, and it,
Or it's every 3 years, so what happens if we have a new asset
Right.
within those 3 years?
I guess
And then it's
Yeah,
updated, yes.
right.
like the ball fields are a new asset, but they're not in our current replacement reserve study.
Right.
So,
Okay.
could we use replacement reserves? Under this provision, it sounds like we could not.
No, but what would happen is the ball fields, they're brand new, but as we're going through the process right now, we're pushing 10 years, 15 years out for replacements, and they're in the new study. So that's why you're required to do them, or it's a best practice to update them every 3 years.
So you don't see any binding or
Well,
difficulty?
the only thing that says, was this attorney language, or was this language from the subgroups?
Actually, the working group
The working groups, yeah.
and Brian
All right.
worked this language
Okay.
himself.
Yeah, because I think if you're trying to describe that it's the capital items in the replacement reserve engineering, and Jackson's point is, because it says in replacement reserve engineering, what if you had to hire an owner's rep for the roof, and that wasn't specifically called out in there? Then that might be problematic, but we really would have to get an attorney opinion on the in and the words like shall and will and those types of things. I think we really need an attorney opinion on it.
And
but-
Okay, can I ask for a clarification for the camera? The pool down at Lakeside, say the roof gets ripped off.
Yep,
Is that part of that?
it is.
But the roofs
So
in the downtown area are not part of that.
They're
Here's the
not proactive.
biggest difference. So let's use the roof, it's your asset. So the Lakeside Park roof, and the Jones Room is your asset, Crow's asset.
Okay.
If you replace it this year, because it was due in the replacement study, in the reserve study, and then next year it gets ripped off by a hurricane, you would probably use your contingency money to fix that and not your reserve money. You
Because
would wait
it's-
until the next cycle came around for roof replacement in the replacement reserve funds.
Okay,
So to Jackson's point, then, I'm hearing what you're saying. The contingency fund could serve as an emergency
In that situation.
bucket, should it not be a part of the study.
And you could technically use your capital reserve dollars for that also.
All right.
But what you're saying is the replacement reserve funds are only being used for replacement
Correct.
items, and you're not moving and shifting them.
That is what it's saying.
I will say that we discussed this at the Crow board level last year and felt like it would be helpful to have this language in the charter. so that future boards would know that that is the structure and that we're not relying on norms, since norms could change.
Mhm.
Okay.
Not,
Well, that's the very definition of contingency, right? I mean,
Right, I mean, it's an
Unexpected.
emergency pop there.
And
that was a great point. Are you satisfied that the three funds would cover each other?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I
Okay.
think
Would
you're right
agree.
with that. All those in favor of this change?
Aye.
Okay, no nays?
I had one comment that's outside the voting.
Sure.
3 years for reserve engineering study is frankly too frequent. 5 years is plenty. Things don't deteriorate. Since you're looking at, you're really measuring deterioration, they don't deteriorate that fast.
Well, you're not necessarily
Yeah, Lord.
replacing things on that 3-year cycle. So if the replacement study in 2016 had a roof that was due in 2019. So we get to 19, the roof's still in perfectly good condition. It doesn't need to be replaced. When they're going through the engineering this year, they'll look at it. If they agree, they'll push it out a couple years and it will restructure the methodology for how it's gonna be funded. So it doesn't mean that they're moving projects up. It just means that they're looking at any changes that have happened in the association over the last 2 years. And is the life cycle of that asset still in good enough condition that you can push it out? Some of your assets, the life cycle may have been pushed further in because it really needed to get done and they missed by a year or two. So they'll have to adjust. And then, great example, we didn't have an athletic field complex in 16. In fact, we just were opening a dog park at that point in time. So we do have some additional assets that needed to be added 3 years later.
Okay, well, I have done these reports myself and work with them regularly. It's just that my experience says that 5 years is, because yes, you do adjust. And that's the whole point of it, is you look at it and say, well, it's deteriorating faster than we thought, we move it up a year. It's sticking together a lot better than we thought, we're gonna push it back a year, or we're gonna spread the cost based on what we can afford in a year if we have that flexibility. But I just haven't noticed that less than 5 years is gonna show me anything that I can't get in 5 years. And I'm looking at the cost of doing it, not the value of the report. But I actually haven't seen your report, so I don't.
I appreciate your comments, Bill. The reality that we're facing right now is that we've done a report every 3 years. You will hear it tomorrow night or a week from the next meeting. We are underfunded. We're gonna have to come up with more money for the reserve fund. If we had waited 5 years, that deficit would be even greater.
Okay.
So I liken it to flying a plane and you're on visual versus instrument. We're on instruments and we don't have much ability to look out on the horizon because the town is developing and growing, plus we have the aging of the original infrastructure. I think there may be times in the life cycle of a community when every 5 years would make perfect sense. We're in too much flux right now to be able to do that, and frankly, it's because those studies are expensive, as you know. I think that we're not doing them more frequently, but had we done one last year, the amount of money that we could have allocated into the reserve fund would have been greater then and reduced the amount that we now have to move around this year. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So,
no, I understand, and from that side, that point of view, I have to agree with you.
Good. I mean, I can see both sides. I would think the board in the future could take some flexibility and look at that as year to year, see how,
This doesn't lock you in any frequency
No.
of when you do that.
No.
no, not at all.
Keep your funds
It
safe.
just answers the question. All right. Well, moving on, further down the charter, the next number 5 is tracking number 4-4, which is, of course, working group 4. That is
Right of easement,
right of easement, and I'll show you where it
13,
shows up is in
13.3.
Charter, Chapter 13. As soon as I get there.
Yeah, you and me both.
All right, the whole Chapter 13 is easements.
But,
When we talk about right of easements, there's.
Right there.
I'll show you, there's easements for encroachment, there's a easement for community development.
right there.
When the working group got together, they felt like there was no good place to put this new language, so they decided to create a new subparagraph, 13.3, standalone, and then renumber the paragraphs after that, which would be easy. Part of this is easy and part of it's hard. The issue was, I'll read it out to you for our consideration. Insert right of easement for non-benefited units to allow residents access to all sides of their house. This is an issue that came to light at the Spring Lake Garden Homes when the space between homes is very narrow and one unit owner is using the space between homes as their living space, their patio, and occasionally the gate will be locked or encumbered, maybe a potted plant, and the other side, the homeowner can't get in there to read his electric meter, adjust the sprinkler system, or just paint the house.
Right.
Or
Or
name it.
wash windows.
Wash, yeah. So this is the language that the working group came up with, and then they tasked, since the issue is about the burdened unit and the benefited unit, they asked, could you put in a definition for what that means? And when I looked at the supplement, it wasn't, it's very legal language, it's not 100% clear. So here's what the working group decided to write, is the first sentence. The owner of each burdened unit shall have the right of unencumbered access at all reasonable times to enter upon the use easement located on the burdened unit for the purposes of performing work related to maintenance of the single-family resident located on such burdened unit. That is the intent. They looked to me to say, could you get a definition for that? And I wrote in what's in the supplement for Spring Lake, but I don't, which is the next sentence, but I don't
Right.
think it's totally clear. But
I moved that.
I hope you understand the intent. Let's discuss it and.
There's more than just one unit there, though. I understand that there's been 3 incidences where people have been locked out either by potted plants being put up at the gate or a wall being built, things like that. But people should have access to all 4 walls surrounding their homes. And that is in the legal documents,
Yes.
so.
The supplement for Spring Lake does imply that you have the right to do this, yes. But in not all cases have homeowners been compliant.
Right.
It's happened outside of Spring Lake
I
before,
was-
too.
I was
just
It
gonna
happened
say,
in
it's
North
not just
Village
there.
when I first got here in 14. It was a 0 lot line, and the
It
homeowner
still
would
does.
just refuse to let the neighbor.
So it's not it's not isolated. to
Yeah,
Spring
it's,
Lake.
it's not just,
Thank you.
yeah.
So this puts the language requiring that not only in the supplement,
Right,
but also in the charter itself, which is
right.
visible for everyone to see.
Was Tom part of this conversation also, Tom Slade?
Tom wasn't, but it was the working group.
Sure. I don't think it hurts if you guys approve it. This will all be, like, I think one of the board members said, it will all be reviewed by the attorneys to make sure language and those sorts of
Mhm.
things are correct.
Yeah, and I agree, because easement has very legal meanings, and having an attorney look at this eventually is, I think, very helpful.
Well, as I said, the definition, I pulled this out of the supplement for Spring Lake. That's where we could use help. But this first sentence is what the working group is proposing.
You haven't updated it. I mean, I'm looking at the stuff you sent, almost as a new one on the charter.
Yeah.
There is, it's the,
No, I see what you're saying, because, yeah, I've got that part.
you have that
here.
part, I don't have that part.
Yeah, no, I have that here.
I,
And then right of easement for everyone. Without limitation, Osceola County, Florida, shall have perpetual, non-exclusive easements upon, across, over, under, and all of the residential properties. That's for Osceola County.
Right.
And then,
Doesn't matter.
for ingress, egress, installation, monitoring, replacing, repairing, and maintaining personal property.
Where are you reading now?
That's 33A.
Right, but that's about the government, Osceola County, and that's not the issue we
Yeah,
want
but
to
it's
talk
also
about.
talking about residential properties.
Well, I understand, but the issue is
No.
under,
It's given the county
That's
or
the
the development
county.
district the right to go onto residential
Right.
properties, that's what he's saying.
and that's where we don't want to put the language, it's under the wrong paragraph.
You want it on
We're making our new paragraph under
easement?
right of entry.
Yeah, 13.
And notice in any utility in that 13.3 also.
In the
Any-
original
Any
13.3.
cable company or,
Okay.
right.
Yeah, right of entry.
This one, this new paragraph the working group proposed is a standalone separate paragraph intended for CROA residents.
Right.
It's under, 13, but yeah, it needs its own because everything else is specific to that.
To the county, the state.
One, right, and the first one's
Right.
easements in common areas, which are your asset common.
Right, in common areas is not,
It would not belong.
doesn't reflect the homeowner.
Right.
So then everything else is just gonna be renumbered as we're going?
Yes.
Yeah, just
Everything
one
after
number
this
down.
will be renumbered.
Everything gets shifted
So the
down.
present 13.3 will remain as it is, there will just be a new, it'll become 13.4?
Well, the current 13.3 will
Be
stay as it is, it'll become 13.4.
Okay.
Oh, okay, okay.
Oh, yes, sir.
Does this section require or need a penalty or an ability to enforce a violation?
That would be, let me see,
So-
under covenants, and I'm trying to recall, when these issues came up among homeowners in the last several years, I believe there was a violation written.
My question is this, you can't write a law locally that will trump a governmental, state, federal law. So I think this one really needs legal review, because if we were to say, hey, it's allowed here, but the state law says you can't go on someone else's property for whatever reason, this law doesn't trump that. And even if we were to fine them for every time they said this person wouldn't let me on their property, the state could say, they have no right to be on the property. So I just think it needs a little bit more follow up on it. I understand that why you need it, I understand the intention of it, why you put it in here, but it just needs legal review.
I think if I remember correctly, Tom said that, because we can't enforce it, it's a homeowner to homeowner issue.
Yes.
But I think the consensus of the working group, if I remember correctly, was even though it can't be enforced, they felt that it was important enough to put it in charter,
Right.
I believe is what the
There's-
conversation was.
To put a little bit more weight on,
The supplements have language that say the same thing, but it's very unclear. But it's all in the supplement. This puts the direct language in the charter.
Right, but I think when it comes to enforcement, the reality here is if someone goes and just throws a ladder up on the side of your house, how are homeowners gonna react, whether they're getting fined or not fined? I think it becomes a lot more of a security police enforcement issue on this. But if we're able to show them, they have an absolute right to go into their easement to do this, then.
Then law enforcement can actually
Right,
help.
then they may be able to say. okay.
in the one case, I think it's because the gentleman couldn't get the bug sprayer guy to go around his whole house.
There have been numerous situations,
We
there
can
have been
turn
painting
this into a
situations.
Days of Our Lives episode.
Yeah, we could,
Really?
yeah, there's,
Okay.
and this has been going on for a long time, not just, it's just that in Spring Lake, I think it's a newer issue, for Spring Lake, therefore it's coming back again in conversation. But it's been a long-standing issue, for anybody that's in North Village or have any zero lot line properties. Would you agree,
Yeah.
Steve?
Lake Evelyn is similar.
Right.
Oh, all right.
So, I mean, my my advice would probably be just, if you guys think it meets the intention of what you're trying to accomplish, approve it, and then get the attorney to look at it.
I thought we talked to him about that.
No, I agree with what you're saying.
Indirectly, we did.
I
but
thought we did.
It was,
Does it make sense?
he broached the subject during our question and answer session.
Right.
Yes. And this is our result.
Okay, all right, then I vote.
So, any other comments? Well, we'll go with I'll put it this way, we'll go with the intent when I'm looking at this highlighted sentence. Subject, of course, subject to legal approval, which is in the case of everything we do. But if you agree with the intent, I'll ask that those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And negative? No? Okay. We'll go with that.
Six.
Okay. Item
I'm glad you
6
did.
that I showed.
Dumpsters.
Yes. This is tracking number 1-9. And this is group 1-9. And now we're going to go all the way down to rules. I'm just going through the document according to what we've done lately.
Is this
And,
Exhibit C?
pardon?
Exhibit C?
Yes, Exhibit C rules.
Paragraph 2,
Yeah, this is, I'll show you, pardon the whiplash. I'm in Exhibit C, which is rules, under restricted activities. And under this restricted activities, there are multiple lettered subparagraphs. Parking, animals, discharge of firearms, it covers a lot of territory. So we got down to here, and this is at the very end of subparagraph 2. The working group decided to add a new subparagraph M, which talks about dumpsters. This is a page. It actually follows the format of a COA board consideration to the county for a dumpster ordinance. So that's the basis of this celebration rule.
These are temporary dumpsters.
Yes, and as you can read, for construction purposes.
right.
Yeah, we're not talking about trash in apartments. We're talking dumpsters for construction work, remodeling. I'll let you read this.
Is it reinforced in this again that debris needs to be cleaned prior to a storm?
No.
Or is it just in the one spot?
Just in that spot. I'll have to, well, let's read it and find out. I've forgotten. Do I need to read, or can you all see this?
Well, the
Yes.
audience can't read.
Okay.
Yeah. Or the camera.
So as a new subparagraph under restricted activities, subject of dumpsters, dumpsters must be well-maintained and in good working condition, displaying the name and telephone number of the owner of the dumpster, and be suitably supported at each contact point to prevent damage to paved surfaces. That's where you see the wooden 2x4s or pieces of plywood under the dumpster so it doesn't sink into the asphalt.
The owner of the dumpster, meaning the company that's doing the work?
Yes, yeah, I wouldn't put my name on
No.
it.
All right, let's say that's-
All right, under this paragraph, dumpsters must be covered because we do have wind. Debris must be placed inside the dumpster, not alongside or on top of it. The unit owner, that's the homeowner, is responsible for any additional debris that is dumped in or near the dumpster, even if it is not project-related. All dumpsters are required to be emptied when full. Full is defined as when the contents of the dumpster reach an average level of 1 foot below the top edge of the dumpster size. Any dumpster that has reached the full status and is not emptied within 7 calendar days shall be considered in violation of this rule. Cleaning dumpsters on the street or sidewalk is not permitted. We don't want people hosing it down with all the solvents and whatever debris get washed out into our sewer system, which goes into our ponds. A dumpster placed in the right-of-way must have a reflector on the outside corner facing traffic at all times. Where traffic may approach from either side, two-way traffic, the dumpster must have a flasher or reflector on the outside corner of both sides. That makes sense to me. No dumpster placed on a public right-of-way shall exceed 8 feet in width and take up more than 2 parking spaces. And that happens to be the standard size of a typical dumpster because they're loaded onto trucks and they're all standardized pretty much in the United States. Dumpsters shall not block a public sidewalk or be placed in a location that restricts the sight lines of an intersection. That's a safety concern. Dumpsters placed in the public right-of-way for construction, remodeling, or demolition projects shall be removed immediately upon the completion of the project. No dumpster shall be placed in the public right-of-way for more than 30 days. The community standards manager may approve extensions, and they're cognizant of that now, because some renovations do take longer than 30 days.
Gary, going back to the conversation we first had about town hall versus CROA, I wonder if this applies to where you may have management teams throughout the years that they change that title. It may make more sense just to call that CROA, may approve extensions, and then CROA ultimately delegates down to the management team to do that.
Yeah, that's fair. As the years go by, you do change titles
Yeah, I
of
mean,
your workers.
Right. So,
That was just a consensus of the working group.
I just don't think anywhere else we call out titles of employees.
No, you're right.
Approving of it.
Specifically,
It's
yeah.
not in the charter anywhere, you're right.
Right.
I'm a little concerned about a few issues that we've been dealing with, that we're just approving things that maybe come across as a little too picky. Not that this isn't good, but do we really want to, is there just not a way we could just sort of give to the board the right to develop a dumpster policy and?
This is the result of the board's original dumpster policy that they agreed to present to Osceola County about 2 years ago? Did I say that
Well,
right?
It was at the last end of my term with Jack. I think
It
it
was,
was,
yeah, I think it was
is when he had mentioned it.
It's been
Yeah,
3 years ago.
But then we
Yeah.
got it back, last year,
Uh-huh.
and we tabled it.
Okay.
Mostly for the reason that Eileen is describing. It was so detailed, and Ron's here, he may have a different remembrance of this than I do, but I think it just felt to us like we were too far over our skis. We were trying to tell the county what to do with this, and we didn't want to do that at the time. I mean, that's what happened. I have some views about it, but I'll wait.
Well, Jackson, I can add though to that, I think,
Yeah.
part of it was being included in an overall ordinance from the development district for a lot of different things, traffic, striping, those types of things, and it just didn't make a lot of sense for us to write the county's ordinance for them. I think when you talk about rules and regulations, they're more geared towards hours of operations, what you can and can't do on a basketball court, and if you violate a rule, you just can't use the facility anymore. If you're having your dumpster on the county road, we had no teeth whatsoever, unless it's a county ordinance or you have it in your charter somewhere.
Okay.
And it seems like it fits here in the.
Yeah,
charter.
no, I understand why it should be one of those items. I just think the length of it is,
Right. Fair.
it starts to get, I'm.
No, first I will say thank you, Jackson, because I wanted to get this right. I didn't want to imply the board did or did not do something, so thank you. I want to be fair. And then to your issues, Eileen, I agree that it's all of consideration. Where do we come down on this? All we know is we had an issue to discuss as a task force to consider, we need a rule on dumpsters, because during the last hurricane we had, there was some flying debris.
Right, absolutely.
And some neighbors are tired of looking at dumpsters out of their front door.
I,
There's no rule stopping the dumpster on Celebration Avenue during Christmas every year for the past 3 years, where that was wrapped in Christmas paper, if you remember that. There's just no rule for that. So I think that this is the intention of that. But the other question I would have with this, though, and I don't know what the answer is, I don't know if it's even that big of an issue, but I think we need to get an opinion from the attorney, is does the hurricane storm cleanup for dumpsters and site debris, does it need to go here too? Or does it belong, I don't know whether it belongs here or belongs there or both places?
Well, we did already tonight approve the construction debris.
Right.
We've already approved that. As long as it passes the legal test, it's a piece of cake to move it into this,
And add it
as
here,
a-
too.
adding it here as a
If
double
you just need to
reference,
know
that's
it's
fine.
the same, right.
But I will go back to Eileen, it's up to us as a task force to determine, do we want it, and then how much?
we want it. I just would
Okay.
maybe like to see not go for a vote tonight and see if we can edit it down.
You don't like the I's, right?
I think Tom Slayton was very clear that if we get too involved and, people stop reading after number 2, and it's important and we should give it teeth, and I'm not saying we can, but why don't we take another look at it just to see if we can condense it a bit?
I don't mind the paragraphing, because that breaks it up into manageable points of interest that are important. The issue I want to ask the task force is, what items do you think are important? And which ones do you think you can live without being specific?
I don't have it.
Well, I like it the way it is.
I do too.
I think the specificity is very helpful. And where this really needs to go is this needs to be an attachment to an ARC permit approval, because the contractors will not be reading the charter, but they're the ones that need to do this. The homeowner's not going to be placing a dumpster. The guy's telling you get a dumpster, but he doesn't have any idea where it should go, or even how big it is necessarily. So the specificity is
There's a
good.
item that we can put on the arc. I think Eileen's point, though, is as you're getting homeowners to vote whether to approve these charter changes, is it too detailed?
Yeah, but I don't-
The other thing is that, and tell me if I'm wrong, we are putting the onus on if I have a dumpster and you come along and you throw your stuff in there, I'm responsible for it.
Yes.
That's the way I read it, Jackson.
And we're not doing anything to the person who actually threw the stuff in.
Well, that's something else.
Do you ever find out?
It would be that sentence right there, yeah.
Well, we're not putting any language in.
Well, we can always modify it. But I'm not sure the contractor, he probably would charge me more money if I told him that he was responsible for putting that mattress in his dumpster that somebody left by the road. And that happened in Spring Lake.
Yeah, and I've been in the position of having staff open trash bags to see who put the stuff there, because there might be some nail or something.
Yes.
It gets very cumbersome and complicated, and it's not fair, certainly not fair somebody dumps their trash, which is effectively on my property.
Very.
Is this the working group that Jack from Laughlin is
Yes, sir.
overseeing?
Yes.
Did Jack have any message or anything that he sent along for tonight's vote? Because I know this has been something that he's been working on for 3 years, and Eileen, it may make more sense to just hold off on this one until Jack's.
This was
here.
his message.
Oh, well, let's just do it.
Because it was.
It was put this in.
Right.
Well,
That makes
we
sense.
discussed it at length.
Right,
And.
And this is the way he worded it.
okay.
Yeah, he worded it, but the
Yeah,
working group.
it all
felt-
looks very familiar.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear Jackson's comment. You were holding a comment
Oh, yes.
in front.
There's a rule of statutory construction and language. Bob could verify this, Bob as well, perhaps. The more specific you are, the more exceptions and problems that you create.
Mhm.
And there's a philosophical question here about whether or not you want to be hyper-specific about this particular item when you are most of the time general in this document. That is to say, you've got broad principles and rules, but not as specific. This is the ordinance that Jack brought to the CROA board a year ago that he put in front of us. I think that it presents two problems. One is, I'm not sure that it's viable to put in front of the community to vote on. And the second is, I would have some concern, absent review by our council, as to whether or not it creates more problems than it solves because of its specificity. In other words, I can have a field day with this language. There's all sorts of language in here that, because we're trying to be specific, gives me the opportunity to find exceptions. It's sometimes easier to have a broad principle and then say you back that up at a different level, so.
And I think.
But I'm not
gives-
opposed to getting rid of dumpsters that are wrapped like Christmas presents.
Right.
Just to be clear.
The broad gives the board more authority to say, we feel like it's full, we feel like it's out of control.
Is it out of control?
But that's up to the board's discretion. It happens a lot. I mean, board has the discretion through to make ARC decisions. And it's really a matter of opinion at some point, but the board has the authority to do that because of the way that language was written in turn.
How significant would you say the dumpster issue is?
It needs to be addressed, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, terribly bad.
Just, I don't know if that's.
So simplify what the issue is, right? And, you know, what is it, in a perfect environment, what do you want to have happen as a community?
So, to put a fine point on it, I think this would be an excellent topic for a future facilitated session. In the, not on the July 13th, but in a future session.
Are you envisioning perhaps having different topics at different sessions?
In the future.
Okay.
Yes, now,
Okay.
I will reiterate something
It's a
that
good idea.
implied. To get the most resident input from the 4 topics that you
Right.
selected, I'd like to have a minimum of 2 sessions.
Okay.
Because not everybody can come Saturday at 10 o'clock. We'll get other residents, and we'll get a variety of
And then maybe
inputs.
do a follow-up session with
Okay.
items that are,
Yes,
You have the August 19th meeting, right? That's your second one.
yeah.
we did pick.
So that would be the same as the July 13th. And then do another session
Yes.
that has straggler issues or
Right.
fine-tune issues.
We have time.
Sure.
We've got till
Yeah,
fall,
August
and I
19th.
want to give the community ample time to get all the inputs in, so that we're listening. So I
Okay.
think this might be a good issue. Comment?
I'm just clearing my throat, I'm sorry. I'm trying to do it discreetly, sorry.
With the task force being
Yes.
able to tabling this for now and consider.
Yeah, let's table it then.
It's still an important item, just.
It definitely is.
I do think in your notes though, Gary, the comment that Steve had made about should we also add, you know, to secure your dumpster
During the
for
storms.
storms?
Sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So carry over whatever language is approved in the previous one, carry it over in this.
And take any titles, job titles out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me just do that now, so I won't forget it. It's, what was you proposing, the CROA?
Everything else is CROA approval.
Ooh, I forgot to put on changes. Okay, no
And
problem.
it may be something as simple as dumpsters placed in public right of way shall be removed within 30 days and they can't be overfilled. Something along those lines to where it is a little bit more subjective, but gives the board or governance committee a little bit more authority over that.
There's a few little refinements. Sometimes they put them on main boulevards, and they don't put any reflective stuff on them,
Sure.
and that's at a high risk.
But that does almost sound like that would, if they're on county roads, it does sound like that would be a county authority over enforcing that. I think the problem was though, Jackson, was us trying to write county ordinances when county attorneys write county ordinances.
Well, that's my point.
All right.
This,
Your point, the more general might be easier to enforce.
And then still go back to the county and say, can you write a set of ordinances that, would, I mean, the lights and the letters and all that stuff, that really should be them saying what those rules are.
But they deferred it.
Well, I think that because the Crow Board tabled it because it was mixed in with 10
That was
other
right when we were
items,
here.
they just kind of
The
haven't done
Sahara's
anything
sitting
with
right on
it.
top
Doesn't
of
mean we
us.
can't revisit it with them.
There's no moisture up there.
All right, I'm going to move into we finished the items that we selected for tonight for the charter. Now we're into the bylaws.
Okay.
So number 7 on our list for discussion is tracking number 5-9. This is under group 5.
Group 5. And if you want me to speak on this one?
Yes,
Okay.
first, identify the issue.
We do have language in the bylaws that call for a nominating committee. As far as I know, we've never had a nominating committee, and I personally am not a great fan of nominating committees. So basically, we're just taking out that language. That makes
Yeah, I
sense.
remember. Oh,
That makes,
yeah.
we did, see, I haven't been around long.
This
Yeah.
is under bylaws, section 3.3. You can
Right.
see the original title was nomination and election procedures.
Right.
Right.
So if this is approved, it just turns into election procedures. Let me go to the meat of the paragraph, is these 2 paragraphs here would be, the working group recommended deleting entirely because since we have open elections for Coral Board members, directors, there's no need, or nor has there been.
There is no nomination.
Right.
Nomination procedure
Right.
since the Coral Board was turned over to the community.
My
But
guess
there
is
is a-
it was just missed in the last bit.
Right.
But there is a procedure for nominations, and there is a set time frame for nominations, and I think you have to have a set time frame for nominations, or you'll have people contest the election well
That's
after their
not-
timeframe.
I
Not
think
for
that's still
nominating,
in-
but for,
It doesn't need a committee.
right, not for nominating.
Yeah, but that's the
for-
word,
what's the right word?
nominations.
Declaration of candidacy.
Right.
I'd
Yeah.
rather use that word
Okay.
than
Yeah,
nominating.
right, that makes
Nominating
sense.
implies to me that someone is putting
Right.
forth another person's name.
Yeah, yeah, and typically, if you had a quorum at your annual meeting, you could nominate from the floor.
True.
But we've never had a quorum that I know of, unless early on, but before it was turned over to the HOA.
It would be hundreds of people.
Gary-
800 and something people.
Maybe number A should continue to have declarations of candidacy. You've taken out nominations and declarations of candidacy, but we are leaving in declarations of candidacy, basically people.
Of candidacy, not elections, right? That's still saying somebody else has to do it.
No,
Has to put you
declaration
forward.
says- means that's what we do, when we submit
declare.
we submit
To
it
CROA.
To CROA,
I wanna run
that
it.
is the declaration of candidacy.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's a process that we're currently doing.
That's a reasonable input, I think.
It says,
That's my opinion.
Yeah.
every eligible person who has a bona fide interest can basically file as a candidate.
Yeah, as long as they're within good standing.
Right, the good standing.
I just rejected that deletion, so now that paragraph says that.
Okay.
Okay, that puts it on the individual. That's what we want.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, that works.
Mhm. The sentence that got deleted specifies that the board
Right, nominations.
conducts nominations, and the board doesn't do that. It's an open process, so that sentence got deleted.
But it still has who's not eligible.
I think that what it's saying is that the board has the opportunity to establish other rules and regs as it deems appropriate to conduct the nominations of directors in a fair, efficient, cost-effective manner. It's a sentence in there giving the
My-
board some powers.
My guess is, and this is strictly a guess, is if for some reason somebody leaves the board, there needs to be some type of a process to go in, is that?
That's already addressed.
That's already addressed under replacing a director.
Yeah.
There's a whole
Yeah.
section
Right,
for
okay,
that.
so,
And it
do
looks-
you know what that would be in there
It
for
looks
then?
to me just a general statement that gives you the ability, if you wanted to do something different, set some rules or regulations. You say, right now, we do it from January 1st through February 1st, and you say we want to go until the end of February, whatever those different rules and regs are within the process.
To make this sentence right here to read appropriate, then I would suggest this: the board shall also make one change. The board shall also establish such other rules and regulations that it deems appropriate to conduct the declaration
Yeah.
of candidacies in a fair,
Process,
efficient, cost-effective manner.
Right.
Yeah, that's better.
That makes sense.
That's better.
Now, does that mean anything?
No, I just,
Well, the board has the right to establish rules and regs for just about everything, but
I'll type it in.
that would be my best guess of why they wrote it in there like that, just to give them a little bit more flexibility if they solve problems one way or the other to make rules and regs for them.
I believe the history here is that this was part of the class of voters.
Yes.
The class of board members, and it was a provision that was written in to protect the developer at the time, to give the developer the ability to set up a nominating board in case there was a renegade homeowner at that stage, so.
But I will give you an example of something that the board has approved over the last 4 years that I've been here is PJ Cartwright being the person that actually oversees it. Now, the board could say, this year we want Jane Doe to oversee it, or whatever that is, and I think that just gives you a little bit more authority for doing that.
Can the board deny a declaration of candidacy?
Well, only,
Only
If
under-
it's not
So if I'm
available-
wanted in 6 states?
If a member is.
that'll do it.
But did you pay your
Yes.
assessment? That's basically.
Yes,
oh,
it's in the bylaws that
Okay.
if you're not a member in good standing, in other words, you're delinquent on your assessments. that
Or
can be-
there's,
Well, but-
there's I think there's state statute that says if you're wanted by.
There's a warrant out for
If
my
you're on the
arrest or
FBI's most
something.
wanted list, you
Yeah.
can't,
Oh.
right.
Stranger
Okay.
things have happened, right?
Yeah, it's in 720, but as far as Crow is concerned, it says if you're not a member in good standing, you
Okay.
haven't paid your assessments.
and it has to be done within the deadlines
Right.
that are established.
Right.
Okay.
There was an issue a couple of years ago with someone that declared a candidacy for CROA, then withdrew their candidacy,
Correct.
then tried to reapply after the deadline. And I
Right.
believe that decision was made by management, not by CROA, but I don't know that for sure. In
Well,
accordance with the.
With the guy-
With the bylaws.
Yeah.
right, but I think the Crow board said, no, it's, the declaration of candidacy is already done, and then we got legal opinion on it, and they said, yeah, well, if the declaration of candidacy ended, then they can't be submitted.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember you asked the lawyer about it. Read the highlighted sentence, rather than strike it completely. Does this make sense?
Can you read that for the,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
sorry.
The board shall also establish such other rules and regulations as it deems appropriate to conduct the declaration, I didn't write it out, the declarations of candidacy.
Yeah,
You
get
wanna
rid
say
of
declaration
nomination.
Candidacy process and remove nomination.
Yes. that-
Candidacy intent, perhaps.
Oh, crap.
Looks like rain.
I can't spell,
Ours
sorry.
in red it is, and nastier it
Let's go
is.
check
I'm not
There is
used to
something
this.
over the top of us.
What's my
my
porch furniture doing at this moment?
It's a candidacy process then,
Okay.
and remove nomination.
Right. I got
Yeah,
wording
strike
track
those.
changes.
Oh, yeah.
Of directors in a fair and efficient and cost-effective manner.
No, it's going to say, as it deems appropriate to conduct the declarations of candidacy.
Yes, that's where we are.
I'll make
Is
that
it
singular,
clean?
not plural.
Yeah.
Declaration of candidacy
glad
process
my
in a
granddaughter is
fair,
in
efficient, and
New York.
cost-effective manner. Does cost-effective have anything to do with it? Should it just be fair and efficient manner?
No, is there,
No.
there's not cost involved, is there?
Well, there's a huge cost involved with the election process.
Oh, but when you talk about declaration of
Declaration of
candidacy,
candidacy.
is there a
Yeah,
cost-effectiveness
period,
for?
no, there isn't, because we don't have to pay anything to run, and we don't and they don't pay us or
No, the
give us
only
any
thing-
money for
The only thing that would
campaigning.
really cost anything is just the town hall, when they, or management, when they gather the applications is all. That would, but no expense beyond that.
So the rest of that should be deleted,
Well, how
In a very
about in a
efficient
fair and efficient manner?
Yes.
period.
I think efficiency includes cost.
Mhm.
Yes.
Do you guys
Efficient,
see that being mission critical?
efficient would pretty much cover anything. You can attach anything to efficiency.
So that means if somebody comes to you after the fact.
That seems like a better sentence.
Yeah,
Now, get back to,
Clean.
back to the original issue. These two paragraphs were about the celebration company and the nominating committee, which is no longer a part of open candidacy. You
Oh,
may
yeah.
want to read through that.
So it's just removing the.
That's
small
language you want to take it out.
That is true.
Yeah.
yeah, no, that needs to go away. That's past its expiration date.
I just, the working group, and I have to admit myself, it just doesn't apply any longer in our current process
Mhm.
Yeah.
of open candidacy.
Okay.
This is tracking number 5-9. Is a nomination committee still required? Working group recommended to omit this part. We've updated that sentence. The lead-in paragraph now just says election procedures. And we changed the title of subparagraph A to declarations of candidacy.
Mhm.
Any other conversation or problems?
5-9?
This is
No.
tracking number 5-9.
That was a tracking number.
Tracking number 5-9.
That was on the,
I'm not looking at the right one then.
Do you have version 6?
do you version 6?
Yeah, I do, I thought.
Well,
It's on this
the
last
next to the last
page.
page. No, it's on the last page.
Last page.
18.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, I don't.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
You're looking at version 4.
I must, dear. June 6th,
No, this is
This
version
is
6,
version-
June 24th.
Version 4.
June 24th, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
No other comments, I'll ask for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Yeah, we're
Any
good.
Against?
Okay.
Gets rid of that.
Number 8 was not on the version 6 I sent you, but it was an issue that I worked on myself because I wanted to research it, and I will present it to you right now for your consideration. That's not it. Okay. This is in the bylaws, paragraph 3.19, which is management, which is the people we hired to run the day-to-day business. Please ignore that part right there.
320.
This paragraph in black is in the original bylaws. The association shall not be bound either directly or indirectly by any management contract executed during the celebration company control period. You see that's all in caps?
Yeah.
All right? Unless such contract contains a right of termination exercisable by the association, CROA, with or without cause and without penalty, at any time after termination of the celebration company control period, there's that term again, upon not more than 90 days written notice. I did a word search through both the charter and the bylaws, and the term, the celebration company control period, only appears in this single paragraph. So then I wondered, what does that mean? I went back to the original charter and found the definition, which I typed in blue. And I just wanted you to read it. This is from September 2003 Charter, paragraph 2.1.
Oh, I've got that.
It defines the celebration company control period is the time when the celebration company is entitled to appoint the majority of members of the board of directors. That's before they gave control back to the town, you might say, or the community. And then it defined that as the celebration control period began on the date of the association's incorporation, which was 1994, and terminated when 75% of the total number of units proposed by the master plan, exhibits A and B, or list those units, had certificates of occupancy issued thereon. Well, that 75% period was, what's the right word?
A year or?
No, that 75% of the total number of units,
Has been satisfied.
yes, thank you.
Was
had certificates of
satisfied.
occupancy, were satisfied in the early 2000s.
2004.
2004, long ago. Okay, so I just wanted to show you, I am not proposing that we type this in. I wanted to show you the exact language which defined that period.
Why wouldn't we propose that we delete it?
That is my recommendation. But I wanted you to be able to read what that meant.
It's dated,
Well, that period has passed,
right,
and CROA now has complete control
right.
of its own board of directors. So
It was just missed in the previous revision, is my guess.
that is correct. And so what I'm
Did they even
proposing,
revise the bylaws at all, or was it just the?
no, they did.
They did?
They
Revised
did.
everything.
It just missed it.
They just missed it.
Well, again, maybe legal opinion on whether or not, because of any ties to CJC, that needs to still be in there, but if it's not, if it doesn't, then there's no point in being
If-
pro exception.
Because it doesn't have anything to do with CJC.
No.
Exactly, and
Yeah,
I've
it's
read the
independent.
articles of incorporation of CJC, and there's no mention of the Celebration Company, other than it was founded and started, period.
But aren't they
That's correct.
still active? Aren't they still active in development?
Yeah, but 75% is already met though.
Oh,
Well, it
okay.
basically is saying that they have the right to appoint a board, is
Right,
what it's saying.
and
The
that
board
right
is
no longer
appointed and
exists.
it doesn't, yeah, it says.
And the management contract, which you've already passed that, I
It's
mean,
already
that's
done.
been
Right.
passed multiple
So it
times.
just
since
needs to be deleted.
2004.
Right, so I present you with the only reference in the governing documents where this control period is mentioned, and I presented you with the original definition to show you that that period has passed in 2004, when it became official that we elect our own officers, board members, directors. So Gary's recommendation is that we delete this entire paragraph.
Yes. Second.
Any questions or comments?
That's good.
No.
Okay.
All those in favor?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, no opposed? That is, today's the 25th of June. And I agree with the assessment that I think it was just overlooked by mistake. Now, as a couple of you pointed out, in my issuance of the issue sheets, version 6, there were two number 9s. And I'll go to the first one, which is tracking number 3-1, which is working group 3, with Bill Grindle worked that. That, I'm gonna let Bill talk about it, and I'll go to the bylaws section where it's mentioned. If you want to, Bill.
Yep. Well, the question was whether there was going to be a 2-year budget that was going to be produced. And after a lot of discussion, there was accounting practice and management practices tends to have a 1-year budget, and the process is in place. I understand it to be working well, and it was rejected by the working group as,
I'll add to that, there was a lot of discussion of should we make it should CROA mandate a 2-year budget, biannual? And here's the paragraph where it specifies preparation of an annual budget. And here's where you would put in a two-year budget process.
Right.
One of the other things that came up during the working group was they felt this was more of a policy decision that the board could accept on their own and not need to be, the working
Right.
group felt like it didn't need to be mandatory. But that's up for discussion, and that's how the working group rejected this proposal.
This 1 year or 2 year?
Right. Currently, it's 1 year, and they consider it a
Currently 1
2-year.
year, we want to move it to 2 years.
Well, that was the recommendation, but the working group felt that
Rejected that.
rejected it, felt that the present process, and in management, property management, this is very typical to have a 1-year budget, and there's a scheduled process, and timeline for developing it, but 1 year is generally adequate. We're working this year on next year's budget.
It doesn't prohibit the board from, on their own, making a policy to accept a 2-year budget process.
Right.
In fact, they're doing that now.
So they're moving towards a 2 year.
Yeah,
That's what I'm.
so the rationale here, I think Bill's right, that, standard practice is you do 1 year, 1 year, 1 year.
But we're finding out it doesn't work.
Because of and this will dovetail into discussions of term limits and length of terms and so on. If you look back at CROA over the last decade, I think many people would characterize it as a lurching experience. We go from one extreme to another extreme. We had and I mean, absolutely no disrespect here because you'll kick me, but we had a CROA board a couple of years ago that was very cost conscious and looking to save a lot of money. And then we had a CROA board after that was expansive in the projects that they wanted to begin. And then we had a CROA board, the current board, that has tried to reconcile both of those. And the process of doing an annual budget has meant that we don't have much consistency. We really tend to go, back and forth, back and
Extremes.
forth. So the thought was, and I'm ambivalent in the sense of, if we have the right to do it as a CROA board, but aren't mandated to do once a year versus every 2 years, maybe that solves the problem. But our concern was that we didn't want to perpetuate this wild zigzag that was going on, and that a 2-year budget might provide a greater sense of stability for the community
Right.
and a greater sense of stability for management, so that they knew how to hire people, how to staff up, what levels of service to hit, without having to worry that in a relatively short period of time, that was all going to be changed dramatically. So I don't know if you mandate it or not. I don't know that mandating is the solution. But I guess we wanted to, at CROA, we wanted to have the conversation about whether or not the community felt comfortable with this behavior, or would prefer that we try to get something that's more elongated. Is that interesting?
Right. Well, I guess my question is, because I've been part of the budget process for properties elsewhere, and I read the budget that comes out here, but I'm not seeing the process. But correct me if I'm wrong, most of the actual costs are close to fixed. You're gonna have labor costs, you can't really do much with the insurance costs. Many of the costs really are gonna be annually adjusted based on somebody charges more. So what are the things that are driving the fluctuations? What line items would those be?
Level of service.
It's level of service. I mean, we have a 60-tab spreadsheet
Right.
with this budget, and while there are a lot of things that are fixed, we also did how many workshops last year, just going through level of service, on items where we were saying, how many lifeguards do you want? What are you gonna do about this? How much are you gonna put in to a new recreational facility? How many staff people do you wanna have at a certain level? What's your expectations about landscaping and service areas? I think that one of the challenges that we're faced is that this is a community now of 10,000 plus people and with 750,000 visitors a year. If this were a normal municipality and not an HOA, we might be asking ourselves, is there a better way to budget the process so that we didn't have such dramatic turnover? Now, if there's the potential for board members to have a longer term, or a 3-year term, or avoiding some of the term limits, you might cut down on some of the back and forth, but it is a very difficult, we basically shut down CROA for the better part of 2.5 months to do almost nothing but budgets.
Right.
And that may have been a function of the fact that there were 4 brand-new board members who were going through this process the first time. I'm hopeful that it'll be smoother this year, you know, because the treasurer is so much better. And so, you know, but at the end of the day, it's a big chunk of our time and energy, and I don't know if it's the best place to be using that time and energy every year, starting from scratch.
I think just for one of the practical challenges, and I'll use a current situation, we're in the process now of, you know, we have, we proposed some increases in staff. Elections come up, what happens if the next board says, wait a minute, you don't need all these
Right.
people, and then you just cut them, so they just hired them, you went through all the training process, and now you're gonna get rid of them?
Yeah.
So it's the fluctuation and inconsistencies from board to board, without having the level, the cohesiveness. When you build a cohesiveness after a year, you finally get things working and then have them leave, or, you know, so it's a possibility of having a whole new flip. So, it's just something to Jackson's point, it's something that I think needs to be considered. To your point, does it need to be actually in the documents?
And with all of that you heard for the rationale behind doing 2-year budgets, I would question whether or not this is the only place it needs to be, because this is powers and duties that tells you that you're, as a board member, you're responsible, you have to do a budget. But 12.4,
It goes in all these places.
okay, yeah, say the chart, the CCNRs definitely
I
would need to
just,
be addressed.
I just pulled up one spot. Yeah.
What was the hesitancy of not making it a mandate, which I would lean towards, I think it should be? I mean, I guess the question would be, if that's gonna create a greater stability and a better use of a director's time and ability to be proactive and make sensible decisions for the community and free up real time, I think you would have to hardwire that in, because the reality is, if you don't hardwire it in, you really are at the mercy of whoever's on the board at that time. So really, the question to me is, it really should be, if that's what we think is reasonable, a hardwired decision to say that it should be a 2-year budget.
That's what we were.
You can change it in 10 years.
That was the request that we made into this group. You know, the practical reality of serving as a board member is
Right.
challenging. You know, we're not full-time, we're part-time. I wouldn't say we're volunteers in the sense that, you know, it's something more than that. We're unpaid employees in a sense. But it's a significant amount of work, and as you know, Bill, budgeting is not something you just sit down and kick out in a few hours. And so there was, I think, a fair amount of frustration last year that we spent so much time dealing with the budget, and then we turn right around, and here we are again. And to Vanessa's point, we don't know but what that would be completely undone within hours of it.
Especially when you're talking about human capital in there of real lives, right? It's a little bit unethical and unreasonable, I think, to say, we're gonna hire you, and then next year say, okay, we don't have a budget for you. So,
And I've been on both ends, because I was in the board a couple of years ago when they went, you don't need these people, you don't need these people, and these were, it was a cut, and it's a level of service issue. Where do you wanna be? Do you wanna be here, or do you wanna be here? And it's a real conversation, and it can fluctuate.
So,
Just process-wise then, the budget is actually a 2-year rolling budget, not a 1-year budget. And then if a new board comes in, then they inherit next year.
Yeah.
And they're looking at the year after next year, and that's supposed to
Just to level out.
smooth things out, okay. Because by the second year, they've had the benefit of a year's education.
Yeah.
and there's staggered term limits, right? So there'll always be somebody that has some intimacy with that budget from year to year, so you're not coming in cold.
Theoretically, but remember, we had a change election, and you know, we had 4 brand-new members, and,
that's a majority vote.
you
Yeah,
know, so
Right.
it was that's unusual, but it can happen, obviously. So I would really like to see you either hold off on making this decision right now and put it up as one of the items to be discussed further. I would really like the task force to hear from Brian. This was something he was pretty passionate about, I think, and wanted to.
He attended our work.
He was there.
He was there,
Okay.
yeah, the whole time.
Okay.
Bill brought up a good point that we could do more research, but I could ask you, but it'd be off the top of your head, is everyone's budget, no matter what corporation or organization you're running, is a little different. And we've all had some experience of that. So that's a good question to ask. How much of our budget, percentage-wise, is fixed cost versus percentage-wise that is variable level of service? If it's 75% fixed cost and 25% variable, then maybe there's not a big impact. But I don't know. I've never run the numbers.
Well, staffing's a big number. And
Yeah.
that is directly tied to level of service. And Jackson and I had this conversation earlier today. There's only really 2 or 3 services that you're required to provide based on your CCNRs and your bylaws. And that's pretty much your collection of your assessments, your community standards, and maintenance and operations of your facilities. And everything else is really up to the community to decide
You
how
don't
much
have to
level
have
you want.
lifeguards, you
And
don't
those are
have to
big
have,
numbers.
you don't have to have the monitors,
No.
none of that.
No, I agree, but we do have pools, so we will have lifeguards.
You don't have to have
No.
lifeguards.
No.
Okay, all right.
You just put a sign up that says no lifeguard.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I've looked at the budgets for several years, but I can't recall at the moment. Is the personnel cost higher than our operating and maintenance budget? Or is it the other way around?
Yeah, these are general, I don't have the exact
Right.
number, but the operation and maintenance is around 800,000 for the landscaping contract. Now, that's fixed for 3 years, it goes out to bid and it can be changed. But the staffing cost is closer to 1.6 million, I think.
Okay, so
It's
that
much
answers,
higher.
without getting specific, that answers the question. It's more variable than fixed. And therefore, it can be modified depending on the board's whims,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And
like I
major
said,
changes
And I've
that,
seen it both ways. It's not a pretty picture, I gotta say.
So knowing that fact puts it in a different light too.
well, and this board is really trying to move towards long-term strategic focus and sustainability. Hence, but the sustainability study that they have, looking at key performance indicators, so all of these puzzle pieces fit together. But if you start taking pieces out, they don't necessarily work the same way.
Yeah.
So the recommendation is to table it here and then maybe build it into a community conversation?
I would like to. I
I mean, we
would
could tee it up.
respect the decision of the working group. On the other hand, I would like, Bill, if you're comfortable with this, I'd like to revisit it and continue to have the conversation a bit more. And if the working group still feels, after you've heard from other CROA board members and other members of the community, that that's the right decision, then we respect that. But this is a fairly big item for us on a day-to-day working basis. This was one of the key things that we had hoped to
Yeah.
bring to you.
Okay.
Well, I voted for the 1 year, but hearing this, I'm willing to
Sounds like a
hear more and reconsider. Is that allowed?
Yes, sir.
You all are
This is
making
our task
recommendations,
force.
right?
Right, I know, but since we already voted, I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if we could go back and,
Well, in the working group, they're
Okay.
not technically voting members of the
Okay.
task force.
Okay.
So a quick question for the current CROA board members. Do you think there would be anybody, a past board member, that would say it's got to be 1 year? Or do you think there's a pretty unanimous consensus amongst, because I would say as a community resident, I have to trust the people that do the job every day, what's going to work best. I'm not there, right? So I'm just wondering if there's anybody that would be the opposite of it's not a good idea, if you think historically. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know. I think it depends on what era you're talking about.
Yeah.
If we go back 10 years or so,
Mhm.
I think those board members might say, do it every year because the process was simpler.
Right.
And that was my point about the size and the complexity of
Right.
the community.
But if you went back like 3 years or 4
Yeah.
years?
When you take something like the ball fields and you recognize the scope of that project and the number of staffing steps and the amount of work and the rules and the regs and the cost of equipment and so on, it would be good to be able to do that work and set it and know that we're set on that. Because we've been aggressive and ambitious about the development of the community in the last 5 or 6 years, I think a more professional 2-year management program would make greater sense. That's my personal view. I think a board member in the last couple of years would probably say, yeah, we spent a lot of time doing budgets.
Right.
But if we go back to the early days here in Celebration, budgets were pretty much, the Celebration company came, they imposed the budget, management said, okay, we're gonna do it, and that was the end of the deal, and they'd say, I don't know why you can't do that.
It sounds like there's a strategic, I heard this in my ear too, that I think is interesting to your point, and that is, what do we really want as the level of service for this community? And I think that's an important conversation if you're doing strategic planning, to say, look, this is right out the back gate of Disney. Guess what? People walk in here with an expectation that the bar is up here, not down here. So what is a cost for that service that we all sort of expect is a good strategic conversation as you're planning, I think. And that connects to the budget, right? I mean, so it's gonna cost more.
Part of the 5.
I approached the budget as thinking, well, it's just a bunch of numbers, because, I'm a words guy. But the reality is that it is level of service, and you make policy decisions out of the budget, and we found ourselves undoing budget decisions, policy decisions, and I'm sure that's frustrating to the prior members of the board who may have felt that, they were right in doing what they're doing. But if you do that every single year, then I'm not sure you're benefiting your community, because there is no consistency and management becomes hamstrung. So, I'm not speaking for them, but I think to a certain extent, the natural reaction is, we're not gonna do anything. We're gonna go right to the minimum, because we're afraid that if we, go out to what you're telling us, you're gonna cut it back.
Well, doesn't strategic planning drive the budget ultimately anyway?
Yes,
So
it should.
just think about the time frame. In April, the board does strategic planning, just right fresh after they're voted in, then they set the budget. Next April, the new board comes in and their strategic plan, but their budget's already done. Budget's been done by the last board. So it's kind of counterproductive to strategic plan again, because you can't do anything with it.
Well,
until the next
strategic
year
planning is
anyway.
not usually an annual event.
Right. Well,
It's
and that's
usually a little bit
another
of a
problem.
longer event,
Strategic planning
right.
here has been more of a
Annual.
one-year business plan.
That's not strategic.
No, it's not.
That's
Not at
operational.
all. And
Right.
it keeps us every year, because of the guidelines and the rules that we're locked into, of jumping around year to year and doing one-year business plans versus long-term strategic focus.
And we did attempt to do a 5-year business when I was on the board, and it didn't work out for a multitude of reasons. And the biggest one is we grew a lot more than we thought we were going to. So when you have a growth like that, you can't possibly plan for 5 years. The flip side of it is, 2 years is reasonable, because you kind of know what's
Yeah.
going down the pike. You kind of get a sense, okay, Island Village is coming in. What do we need to start, or what do we need to start building up now in order to make sure when it's when it's coming out that we have the staff? Okay, well, we know we're doing the athletic field. Okay, what staffing do we now need to hire in order to make sure that they're up and running, and that our assets are protected?
And if you want to achieve long-term, well-thought-out results, it makes more sense for people to run for the board saying, I really buy into the strategic focus of the board, and I want to continue that strategic focus. And what it seems to happen year after year is people running on individual platforms. This is
Right.
what I want to
Right.
be done right now.
Yeah.
And on small scales, a lot of times, that they don't
Right.
foster long-term strategic focus.
Yeah.
And this is a community, you said it perfectly, this is the backdoor business. This is a community that should be thinking.
I'm expecting Disney to
long-term.
change my light bulbs. Why don't they? So, yes.
That's right.
Listen, I got 20 years of Disney. I get it,
That's
right?
right.
I think this is a really interesting discussion. I did not make Bill's original workshop, and, because we were on a cruise, what can I say? And we truly enjoyed. And my original thought was, 1 year's fine. But as I'm listening to this, and of course, everybody always goes back to, well, what's good for things that I'm interested in, as a member of the Special Events Committee, it would be really good if we could do 2 years' worth of planning, so we don't, when we get to December, we start saying, well, we're going to have this assuming that it's back in, it gets approved again in the budget. So it does make it much more.
I think it's easier to create community synergy too. I mean, so if you know what's expected, we can look at how and cross-pollinate so that there's a more cohesive approach. I think it would be really interesting to create, I keep coming back to this level of service though, because that's where the money is, right? I mean, it'd be interesting to have a philosophy statement of, here in Celebration, this is what we envision service to look like. And from even if it's a statement that goes from board to board, just so you're not going this and this and this and this and this, because I don't think that's important.
Especially when all you're saying right now through this is, we're gonna collect your dues.
Right.
We're going to make sure that you keep your house to a community-wide standard, and we're gonna maintain your assets, we're gonna maintain your common areas. You're not required at all to do a 4th of July
Right.
parade or any of those other
Right.
things that come along with it.
But that's why we live here.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly, right.
So what I'm getting out of this is, I started with, this was a typical annual budget process, and, why mess with it? But it's really not, that's really not the issue. The issue is a budgetary stability issue
Yes.
for future years.
Yes.
And that's what we're trying to address here. It's not the budget process, it's the stability process.
Yeah, I really like that framing because the stability is the question.
Yeah.
So if you're not gonna get it through your terms, right, the stability through your terms and your philosophies, then you need to get it through, at least through the budgeting process. Or both, which would make it even better, because if you already have the continuity of a cohesive group, then you can just keep on building upon positive things, rather than trying to undo what somebody else has done.
And I would say you have to hardwire that, because if you don't, it's going to be at the mercy of whoever's win. That's what you're trying to counter, is what we're fighting out.
So I'll put a hold on the conversation
Okay.
because it's been
Very good.
excellent and fascinating. And I wanted to remind everyone, Bill
Usually you
brought it
can
up,
look at it
Eileen said it too,
long-term,
that
like I've got this
the working
stuff,
group
and then
only
I take
provides an
this
input
many
to
months
us.
to pay it off.
The task force
And
makes the
someone,
final
usually a
decision
spouse,
as far as what
"Oh,
we're
I wanna buy this
submitting.
right now. Oh, we're
And that's
still trying to get
perfectly
rid of
fine
this debt.
to,
So I can give you a
uh,
little bit of money towards that. And what we're saying is, for a 2-year period, we can stretch things out, or we can save people's jobs, or we can cut back on stuff.
Right.
So,
Right, it's a longer window.
I think so. I'm seeing it in government where that second mentality is starting to take over, because they're starting to see that it's more beneficial. Instead of having to hit it every year, every January, you have to hit it on a new budget or something like that.
I'm sorry, I'm just having trouble hearing your conversation.
That's all right, no, I'm just.
It's unofficial.
Yeah.
So, onward.
so I was going to say that it's perfectly fine for the working groups to provide an input. We'll discuss it. Sometimes we need to, as you know, we have sent some things back to working groups to
It's okay to
renegotiate.
revisit.
It's perfectly fine. We have time to do
This
this.
Monday?
So, to wrap this up, we've been through 9 issues tonight. I think it was very successful because we followed it through and had great discussion. I do appreciate the audience for sitting with us and listening. I appreciate Jackson and Vanessa as board members to provide some background, and also Steve from representing our maintenance agent there, our management agent, to help us out.
Sometimes maintenance comes into.
Yeah, okay.
It's a big part of the budget.
So, quick reminder,
Let me clean the toilet.
we are, Bill is having his working group on Monday, July the 1st at 5 o'clock, because he has extra issues in addition to this one,
Right.
and that's what's planned. The task force meets the next day on Tuesday at 6 o'clock. Task force is meeting on the 25th of July at 6 o'clock, and also on the 30th of July. But I want to encourage the community to attend the facilitated session where we're going to discuss 4 very good issues on Saturday, the 13th at 10 o'clock in the morning here, led by Kathy. Thank you for explaining that.
How does the community hear about that?
Yes.
Since
Good
the
question.
newspaper/magazine came out today.
We will be putting it on the flash, the Friday website flash, and then it'll also be on the website.
Is there any way we could do the board?
Design?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Okay, I just think it's a great
I agree.
source of, people drive by and see that.
For the task force, I'll send you a updated version of this with tonight's finishing touches, and you'll also get PDF versions of what we've done to the charter and bylaws.
To the
Okay.
PDF version, I opened the one you sent me. The thing is, I can't expand it, and the comments are cut off.
I know, one day it worked and another day it didn't.
Okay.
And it must be something in the software in my computer. I will try again.
I'm comfortable blaming it on Adobe myself, because
Thank you, Gary.
And we'll do the schedule. So if that's all, I'll call for adjournment.
Yep.
Sounds good.
sounds good.
Thank you very much. And if
Thanks.
somebody
Good job.